Okay, I just want to make sure we are live. And it does show that we are live streaming now. Hello, everyone. Welcome. Please do join us. I'm just going to share this out, but I do want to welcome everyone to today's live stream. Give me just one moment. Say hello if you are here. We'd love to hear from you. You might be hearing some clicking. Give me 1 second. I want to make sure that I can see all of your comments as we do this live stream. All right, awesome. So let me go ahead. All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's show. I am so excited because I have an amazing show for you today because our guest is Dr. Paul Anderson. And I will introduce him in just a bit, but for now, for those of you who are live here and joining us, I want to thank you guys for being here today. And give us a shout out, say hello. It's always nice to hear from you and connect with you. It's a very special show, like I said. We're going to be talking about out-of-the-box cancer therapies. And we want to hear from you. So whatever questions you may have, we'd love to hear from you. Now, before I introduce myself, I want to tell you what today's show is all about. We're going to be talking about thinking outside the box cancer therapies and other chronic illnesses too. So if you know anyone who's dealing with a chronic illness or cancer, please invite them now by tagging them or share this with them. And if you're dealing with cancer, I'm really glad you're here today with us. There are times when we feel like we have no options when we're dealing with something so chronic. And diseases tend to set into the body, and your mind tends to consume the disease. And we live with it every single day. It's in the top of our heads, it's in our body. And how can we control both, right? This is a mental, emotional, physical blockage that's happening, even energetically. We are holding so much pressure, not only within us, but outside of us. And this is when we need help. We need advice from people who are experts in these types of healings and field. So I'm so happy that Dr. Anderson is here with us today. And, you know, that's one of the reasons I left my job as a pharmaceutical rep and found myself here helping people all over the world, bringing science and spirituality to heal health issues. Because I found that, oh, there is something else out there that's going to help me, another alternative. And we all want options and choices as humans, right? That's just how our mind works. We want options and we want to be able to make that choice. We don't want Western medicine to always make that choice for us, that this is it and this is the only way it goes. So I know there are many, many outlets and many people just don't know or aren't aware of them, just like I wasn't until I stumbled upon energy healing. And here I am as an energy healer now. And I've been doing this work for about 7 years. So I'm so happy to be coming live to all of you. If you are joining us, please do say hello. And I'm just going to tap into the Facebook page to see who is joining us. So please say hello if you are here with us today. Now, Dr. Paul Anderson has taken time out of his busy schedule. So I want to thank him first of all for that, because he's going to be bringing us pertinent information that's going to be helping all of us today, whether or not you're dealing with cancer. Maybe you know somebody who's dealing with cancer, but there's also other things that he will be sharing with us today. Now, let me tell you a little bit about Dr. Paul Anderson. He is a naturopathic physician and CEO of Anderson Medical Group, which includes Advanced Medical Therapies for chronic diseases. He specializes in innovative approaches to complex illnesses with an extensive background in intravenous therapy and infusion techniques. He has developed advanced therapies to improve health via therapeutic, syncrasy, including higher, is it hyperbaric
Hyperbaric,
oxygen?
yeah.
Yes, and mild hyperthermia therapies. He is the co-author of the Hay House book. And I know many of you love Hay House, just like I do. And so he is the co-author of a Hay House book called Outside the Box Cancer Therapies with Dr. Mark Stengler, as well as a co-author with Jack Canfield in Success Breakthroughs. His mission is creating, growing, and mentoring advanced medical therapies clinics, is to provide a real life extension of his purpose, which is to share pioneering thoughts which benefit the health of others. So welcome, Dr. Anderson. I'm so happy to have you here, as I'm sure everyone else is too. So thank you so much for being here today with us.
Thank you. Yeah, it's great to be here. Thank you.
So tell us a little bit about your journey and becoming a naturopath and what a naturopath entails, because as people are discovering different modalities and different therapies, I think we may need a better understanding of what we have and all the options we have out there.
So I think that's a really great place to start, because in both the US and Canada, the licensing for naturopathic physicians or naturopathic medical doctors is different depending on what state or province you're in. And something that's unique in our profession, which is, it's not probably good unique, it's just unique, is naturopathic medical doctors used to comprise a very large percentage of the doctors that were in the US. And in the, really in the 40s and 50s, that kind of died off, because the thinking was, well, we're getting more scientific and we have, we can do x-rays and more surgery, and we've started to get antibiotics and other things. And they thought, probably some of these other ways of treating health issues are antiquated and should just go away. So there was sort of a collation of the medical practices. So the osteopathic doctors kind of joined with the traditional or allopathic medical doctors. Naturopathic physicians or medical doctors kind of were marginalized. So it became a very small percentage. And what that left us with by the 70s and 80s were just a very few states that had any even licensing acts for my type of doctor. There's many more now. We're up to, I think, about 20 in the US and about, I think, a little more than half the provinces in Canada. And the reason I truly believe, because I've been around this medicine for 30 years now, I truly believe that the reason it's growing and we're having new licensure and all that is just what you were saying. We saw this really great increase in standard kind of Western medicine helping a lot of things. Like, if you get a bad infection or you need surgery, we've got great tools for that. But then what you saw was you started to hit the 70s and the 80s, kind of when I started to get involved in this medicine, and a lot of chronic illnesses, especially cancer, autoimmunity, things like that. There's not a one pill that kills one cancer kind of, we hope for that, but it doesn't work, right? So then there became, and people got more educated, and people it used to be you just believed whatever your doctor told you, and there was no argument. It was just what you did. Now people don't do that by and large. So the market really has driven this resurgence of, well, can't we do both things, right? So one thing that's important that just is an artifact of that too, if you're in a state that doesn't have a licensing act, anybody could call themselves a naturopath, which is kind of troublesome. So say in my state in Washington, or I've been licensed in Oregon or Arizona, there's very clear licensing, and you can't call yourself, to be like, I couldn't call myself a lawyer because I'm not, right? But in other states, it's a little dicey. So what you want to do is look and see if the person graduated from a accredited naturopathic medical school. It's easy to find in their bio. You can look their school up, etc. But the important thing is, if you're in Mark and I in the book, described ourselves as naturopathic medical doctors because that's what we are. Naturopathic physician is the other term. And that means that you went to a regular 4-year residential medical school that focused on both sides of medicine. In my case, I came from, in the 70s, the other, we call it the other side, the allopathic side of medicine. I worked in laboratories and did a lot of that stuff. So that was sort of my life before. And I left that life. I own my own lab and everything. I left that life because my children at the time were young and they were getting chronic ear infections, all kinds of stuff. And we kept throwing drugs at them and they'd get sick again. And my mother, who's a nurse, actually talked me into seeing a naturopathic physician. And he said, well, why don't we get your kids better so they don't keep getting sick? And I thought, wow, this is really a curious kind of medicine, and that's what kind of led me into it. And I never started with I was just going to be a family practice person, and I was. But what happened early on was there were not a lot of people there at that time. There was not the specialty of integrative oncology or naturopathic integrative oncology or there was none of that. And so people would come in and they'd say, well, you really helped me with my allergies or something. Can you help my mom who's going through cancer treatment? She's really nauseated and all this stuff. And I'd say, sure, we can work with that. So you get a few of those folks. Then we started to do more therapies like intravenous therapies and other things. And then once that starts, that became the majority of our practice, whether chronically ill because of cancer or chronically ill because of autoimmunity, et cetera. So that really led to this odyssey for 3 decades that I've been on. In the middle, or 2/3 of the way through, because of this background and because I was sort of on the front end of some of these things, there was the National Institute of Health Research project that happened to be going on. I was teaching at a university here in Washington, and they were a collaborator with a bunch of other big universities on this, and it was about integrative oncology. So I was in that research project to do the interventional things like intravenous things and heat therapies and all these other things. And our goal was just to look at, because it was sort of a first pass through of any type of cancer. All my patients had stage 4, the worst kind. And what we looked at was, compared to someone with the same cancer, did you survive longer if you got these other therapies added to your treatment? And and generally, yes, you did. The data's coming out slowly, but yes, you did. And that really led to Dr. Stengler and I hadn't seen each other since medical school. It's been about 25 years. He came to a conference I was teaching at, and he said, could you tell this story? Because I was telling it, in conferences. And I said, sure. And he says, would you like to write a book? And I said, well, I would love to write a book, but, I don't know if I can get a book deal. And he says, well, I've written a bunch of books, so I can get us a book deal. He says, but you got to write half the book. So I wrote about all my stuff and he wrote about his stuff, and we traded, and it, so this is actually the book. It's from Hay House, as you mentioned, and outside the Box Cancer Therapies. So Mark Stengler and I wrote that. And our first premise, because we hadn't seen each other in all those years, our practices developed very differently. So we had very different expertise in this area, which really made the book a lot more rich than if I just wrote it or he did. But the other thing is that in our practices, we don't discount any part of medicine. So if you need a drug, I will give you a drug. If you need to go get surgery, we will have you go get surgery or whatever, right? It's not that that's bad or good. And it's the same thing. It's not that what, maybe a natural thing is bad or good. It has a place. And our point in the book is to give people guidance, because there's now with the internet, you can find an answer for everything times 10,000. Some are great, some are really bad, and there's no, unless you have a friend who does this, there wasn't a lot of guidance about it. We have patients come in with 2 shopping bags full of stuff, all of which might be good for them, but there's no way that they can't take all that. And so that was a big part of the book. Part was to tell about the research and what we learned from that, but the other part was just our 50 years of combined practice, and saying, if we were going to help our mother or our sister or brother, what would we have them put their resources into? and it's different if you're in the middle of chemo versus recovery, et cetera. But the book is to guide people. And because we've done this a while and we knew that most of the oncologists, their first response often, unless they work with an integrative oncologist, is, well, there's no research. So we have about 1,100 research citations in the book. That Hay House didn't know that was coming, but we referenced it. They had to hire a scientific editor just to vet those, and I'm sure that made them very happy. But we did it so that the patient or the loved one could say, well, actually there is. So look at the chapter, and like the botanical medicine chapter has over 300 references, and the IV therapy chapter has over 200, and the other 1,100 are spread out, across all of it. So it's we spent our careers collecting all this and needed to put it somewhere. So it's a good resource. A lot of we didn't write it for doctors, we wrote it for anyone, patients, families, so anyone can read it. It's written at that tone, but a lot of doctors like it because finding the references that we've collected over these years is very hard sometimes. And it's in a number of languages now. It's kind of gone around the world. So we're really happy that our work got out there.
That's amazing. I feel like, integrative medicine is becoming more prominent now. And I know a lot of people that do consider integrative medicine because you're integrating different aspects of medicine and not just saying, okay, Western medicine is it. And, it feels like, so what you do, it complements traditional as well as what you have to offer. And you even have that in the book, right? Like you said, the botanical chapter.
Right. It's all about doing the best thing at the right time. And there are great things that some of, for instance, the newer chemotherapy targeted agents can do, but they do like these two things, and there's like 100 other things that stuff we do can help with, and there's timing involved. So yeah, it's about collaboration and doing the best thing at the best time.
Yeah, I agree. I have been to a homeopath. I had been to, for certain skin issues that I was dealing with, and female issues I was dealing with, wacky hormones. And so I wanted something more natural. I went to a homeopath, and it's interesting what their perspective is. There's some of these people tell you to get off your current prescription medication. And I never tell my clients that. I never tell them,
right.
This is not my place to tell them that. And I love what you said about that there's, if you're doing, if we require you to get surgery, we're going to say it.
Right.
But some of these people practicing out there will not. They will say, do not get surgery. You need to get off all your medication, and this is the only way to go. And people believe that,
Yeah, and I mean it's another reason that we put it in a book form and wrote it down. But it's about appropriateness of when and where. So there are times when. Just going back, like the very first referrals I got from oncologists, they tended to be guys about ready to retire, so they didn't care anymore. But they would literally send elderly patients with cancer to me, and that with the advice that was, I could give you chemo, but the chemo will kill you. You're 84 years old. I don't want to kill you as the oncologist. There's nothing I can do for you other than monitor you. I don't know what this Anderson guy does, but he seems to help people. So why don't you go see him, because he's not likely to kill you, So there's times when, and now that's a more honest conversation. Back then it was kind of, now you can ask your oncologist, okay, I got a 5% chance of the chemo helping me. Would you do this if it was you? And a lot of them will say no. I'd find something else to do. But there's other things like early stage breast cancer, early stage prostate cancer, many other things. If you catch it early, where the standard treatment is we will get people ready for the treatment so they're all healthy and everything. We'll have them do the standard treatment because it's got such a high cure rate, and then we'll take care of them afterwards. And that's really, to me, that's always how I've practiced, and it's just appropriateness of X, Y, and Z. And so, yeah, I mean, there are times when let's go out of cancer, but where maybe you're taking a kind of hormone that's not the best type or something, where you might want to get some
Right.
a different kind, or maybe you've been on a particular drug and you didn't really need it as much, and you might need a dose adjustment or something. So there's times for that. But just going and saying, well, I've got a well-managed disease process, but I'd like to work on all this other stuff.
Right.
Let's not unmanage the disease process while we're, fixing the other stuff. So, yeah, that kind of goes back to just looking at the philosophy of the practitioner and kind of what their training is. And again, I think you're in a state where there isn't a license act for naturopathic physicians. You're in New York?
I'm in North Carolina.
Oh, no, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Another N state. Yes. I don't think there's licensing there either.
Oh, interesting. So now, do you take patients from everywhere? Like, do they come to you from?
Yeah.
You're in Seattle, right?
I'm in Seattle. Yeah.
Right.
And that's always happened a bit, but since the book and some other things came out, and since I was talking for 5 years about our research, we have people who come and establish care in Seattle, and that could mean a week or a month or 3 days or whatever. Go back home. We might find them a practitioner locally to help them. They'll come back for kind of their follow-up, and it depends a lot. For example, we have some real close colleagues that I've worked with for years in other states, and we may have them do more of the work after we get them set up. But in certain states where there's nobody who has the same training, or it's very hard to find in the beginning, yeah, they may go back home, do some home care, come back periodically. Yeah, so we do a little of everything.
Do you work with kids as well?
Yes, that's a real, can be a legally dicey area, as you might imagine. And a lot of people in my end of oncology don't work with children too much for that reason. We always have, some of my first cancer patients were children. And in that case, it's a lot more about the family dynamic and their desire to do what we're doing. And we don't, it has to be, everyone has to be 100% in agreement that this is what you want to do.
Right.
And again, with children, some childhood cancers are some of the most survivable, and some are some of the least, so we tend to get both ends. But because of our clinic is there's a lot of clinics that do kind of the middle of the bell curve, and ours tends to get the referrals of people on really one end. So when we work with children, they often tend to have, deeper problems that we're working on.
Got it. So, I know right before we came on live, we had talked that my grandmother, who had cancer when she was very, very, very young, it was stage 4, and they had to take a piece of her colon out and put a colostomy bag. And she had that for years. And then at 93, right, 6 months before she passed, the cancer came back. And it was unfortunate. So is there, like, in your practice, is there a way that people can prevent? Because there are a lot of women that I know, that I work with, who have had breast cancer. Now they're in remission. What now? Because that fear still lies there.
Yeah, there's a couple really important, I think, dynamics there that are critical. I think I'll start with your grandmother's experience, because it's similar to a family member of mine. A little bit different. One was an autoimmune disease that's very bad that took her life, and the other was cancer, but it's kind of the same idea. if you look at cancer as a continuum, we all make cancer cells every day, and our immune system usually cleans them up. So what we call primary prevention is not getting cancer that we know about. So we all want to do that, right? Once you get cancer, though, you've missed that window, and then you generally go into the second phase, which is diagnosis and active treatment, which can be a little or a lot depending on what you have. Your grandmother was probably 60 years ago that that she was being treated. So treatments, some have not changed at all, some have changed quite a bit. So she has treatment, gets into remission. That's what we're hoping for. And then the next phase really is recovery, and this is something that nobody used to treat at all because they weren't sure what to do with it. We do a lot of this now. People come to us and say, I'm disease free, but I really did not enjoy the surgery and radiation and everything. Can you put me back together? What we find is, and we write about this in the book, is the better you do for recovery, the longer your remission lasts. Because if you leave the person kind of disease free but wrecked, their immune system is confused essentially. So we want to get them back online. But then the last part, more to the point, I suppose, is secondary prevention, which is you miss preventing the primary cancer, but you've got your whole life ahead of you. What do you do to stay cancer free or in remission, or whatever it is that's appropriate? And like you said, nowadays there's a lot of women with breast cancer, people with early stage colon cancers, prostate cancer. There's a lot of cancers that get into remission, and people are young, and they're getting younger, which is sad but true. So what we've found, and this is an area like recovery was something people didn't used to treat much, secondary prevention, a lot of patients will come to us and say, well, the oncologist said I'm no evidence of disease, or I'm in a remission, go and live a healthy lifestyle. And they'll say, well, what should I do? And they'll say, well, go live a healthy lifestyle and come back if you get cancer again. What we've found is, especially in the early stage breast cancers and prostate and some of these other ones where you might live a totally normal lifespan, we screen you for all of the things that either the cancer therapy or maybe set you up for cancer might be bubbling under the surface. And because the cancer therapies often kind of suppress your system, you don't have symptoms of these things. So a lot of doctors say, well, they don't look like they have a problem, but if you don't check, you never do. So we look at hormonal things. We look at infectious things that kind of creep in when your body's fighting the cancer and infectious things come in. We look at the mind-body experience. That's huge. And even if, let's say in our practice, we look at that, but we work with people who specifically work with cancer patients and the mind-body thing. You can't do everything, obviously, but you can try, but you need someone really good there to do that. And there's a number of other just basic things to look for. And for example, I think we get more breast cancer survivors for this particular thing because statistically it's one of the highest numbers. But a lot of them are younger and will come in and say, look, I survived all this cancer treatment. I have young children. I want to stay here. Right. And so we'll look at these things and we'll try and rebalance their body so it has the best chance of, number one, nothing interfering like toxic stuff or infections or whatever, but also like your hormone system being back in balance to the degree it can, your digestive system working again, your immune system working. Those don't just come back online naturally. They did if you've been through the most cancer treatment. And one thing I always like to point out, because it surprised me, not that it would happen, but the propensity. In breast cancer and prostate cancer survivors, the number of people with infections that were chronic with no symptoms it's about 100% when we check them. And one of the things that will either delay your immune response for the next cancer or literally stimulate the next cancer are infections you don't know you have. And that's kind of a more modern idea around infections where you think, well, if I have strep throat, I'm really going to hurt and I get these symptoms. If you've had cancer and or been through chemo or all of the above, you may have no symptoms of any of those. And if nobody looks, you don't find them. And we write about this in the book too. There's this statistical thing where radiation and chemo are great at knocking the original cancer down, but if you don't clean the body up afterwards, you have more chance of cancer later. So you really want to, it's like protection afterwards is huge. And there's many other areas that you want to look in, but you think of your core things like nobody gets through regular cancer therapy with an intact digestive system. I mean, they might eat, and everything, but your immune system, your digestive tract gets beat up, and the cells that absorb get beat up. A lot of infections and toxic stuff have to be dealt with, and then this whole thing, between here and here, you can worry yourself back into cancer essentially. I mean, so you really have to work on it. So, it's kind of like a job, but
Yes.
also, if your motivation is to stick around, and especially, it's still, it's a little hard, just talk about it because it's emotional, but looking at a young parent, saying, I'm glad the cancer seems to be gone, but how do I stay with my children, or raise
Right.
them? And it's like, well, wow, so they're super motivated to, do whatever they have to do. And that's great. People are doing that now.
Well, it's amazing, now, back then, well, I don't know what back then means, but when I was young, when I was like 10, 11 years old, in the 80s, like you didn't hear about so much cancer. It's just so much more prevalent now. And not only is it prevalent in youngsters, but also it's prevalent in the elderly. Like I worked with an 82-year-old. Okay, my grandmother was 93, and nobody told her that her cancer came back because they didn't want her to die. No, thinking, oh my God, my cancer came back, and worrying. But you know what? Intuitively, she knew something was right. She's like, I think it's bad. And the fact that at 82, when somebody tells me that they've got cancer, it's just so heartbreaking. And you're right. Like, what do you do now? Where can I go? Because conventional medicine doesn't want to help me right now. They're going to tear me apart. I don't know if my body can handle it.
Yeah.
So it's wonderful.
And that's when you get it sort of depends on your overall health and things, but when you get past 70 and certainly past 80, there are very few oncologists who are going to look at you and say, what I have to offer is not, it's not safe. We can't do that. And yet they don't, it's more common now in certain pockets where they'll have a relationship with integrative oncology, but it's not real common. In the research study, we got a lot of people over the age of 80 because of that very thing, because we were connected with the universities and all in the other big cancer research areas. And they would say, well, that's an easy referral because you guys don't do what we do, and we don't want to kill this person, so go ahead, and that was important. But I did want to kind of bring it full circle to say your grandmother, and in my case it was my mother, you can have really pretty good remission of a bad disease. But what I see with people is if they hit, even, well, here's the thing, you don't live to be in your 80s unless you're pretty healthy anyway. So even healthy people, though, when they get into their 80s and certainly in the 90s, the body slows down. And if there's something under the surface, it's always been there, but it's these things are opportunistic. They like to take advantage when you get, either you're just winding down, you've lived about as long as humans do, or maybe you've lived a long time healthy and then you get something, as an elder, and then that sort of takes the wind out of you. So when we get those patients, we really assess, did you literally have 40 years with no disease, and then now this, and that's very common actually. A good thing is, many of those people at 80 plus, if they were really healthy in the interim, whether they had cancer long ago or another disease or not, they respond really well to natural and integrative therapies because their body hasn't had other problems, right? I mean, if they've lived 70 years with 10 diseases, it's a little bit tougher thing. But some of our longest living patients in the research study were diagnosed at 85, told they had less than a year to live, and some lived to be 90, 95 years old. I mean,
Wow.
they because they didn't have any other interfering things going on.
Right.
So it is, and you do, I mean, you do different level of intensity with somebody who's 80 versus 40,
Right.
but they're very responsive, and at a certain age, you know, I don't know how much you're going to increase maybe their lifespan, but their quality of life is really what's most critical. And, you know, at that point, which I'm sure you see, the mental, emotional, and spiritual aspect and the health aspects and all that, they're not only there like they would be, say, for a 40-year-old, but they're also there with a person much closer to facing their mortality. And so that becomes a whole, you know, whole other overarching thing where you really need someone to sort that out with you. And some of the people I've seen who would have otherwise done well were, I mean, nobody probably, you know, really looks forward to the end of their life, but these people were, they had very suppressed fear of death and, you know, all of that, which is human. But sometimes that would kind of speed up their demise because they couldn't make that connection, you know. So I think that the older you get, it's great that you're responsive and all that. And if you find someone who can work with, you know, your age adjusted stuff and all, you can be very responsive. But you also, it's like it makes this mental, emotional, spiritual aspect, you know, like quadruple the importance that it already is. So that's a big thing. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Now you have this book, Out of the Box Cancer Therapies, and where can people get that if they wanted to?
You can get it anywhere. If you go to bookstores, which is, you know, not many people do anymore.
Amazon.
It's Barnes and Noble has it on the shelf in the health section. And every time I've gone to a Barnes and Noble, I look and there's at least one or two or three in there. Now it's like, this is the hardcover. There's a soft cover now, and there's a Kindle version. At Barnes and Noble online, Amazon online, and we've had a lot of people that live in areas where they do like to support their local small bookstore, and you can order it because it's easily available. And if you speak Mandarin Chinese, it's available in that, and Korean, and there's a number of other languages it's being translated to. And I did it partly teaching and partly book tour in Asia last year when it came out in Mandarin. And the thing over there is, it's like, this is just how they think about medicine. There's not this division.
Right.
So it's kind of taking off in other countries maybe a little bit faster because it's not a philosophical issue for them to think of things this way.
Now, do you have another book coming out?
Yes.
Oh, you said you were working on something else. And
yes.
when is that going to be published?
It is through Lioncrest Publishing. They're the publisher of David Goggins' book, You Can't Hurt Me. That's a really popular one. They published other really big things, but it's the title is Cancer, Living Life While You Have It. And the reason that I wrote it was when we were done with this book and I was out talking to people and talking about this, and it opened the door to I talked to a lot of medical students and other people just about the process of dealing with cancer. What hit me was, we talk in here about the mental and emotional and spiritual aspects, etc., but the book kind of self-selects to people who might be interested in outside the box therapies, which is great because many people are. It's not it's not like a small percentage. But I wanted to write something about the mind-body experience and what I did in it, and it's done with principal writing. We're in final edits and all that, and we're hoping for a launch in June or July. But what I wanted to do is give people, regardless of how they felt about their cancer therapy or what they did or didn't do or whatever, a step-by-step process that I've just watched people go through, and I compare and contrast like better and not so great ways to do that, and who to search for to help them, and where their more common hangups are like to show up when you get a chronic illness or cancer. So it was it again came from my experience and a little bit of research into it, so it's not quite as technologically in depth as this, but it's basically written for anybody who has cancer or a loved one with cancer, to just help them navigate that, because you go from one day not knowing you have cancer, not knowing your loved one has cancer, to they do. That brings up, as you know, a volcano of emotions and things, and those can either be turned to help you, or they can literally shorten your life.
Well, that's wonderful. And when is it coming out, you said?
A lot of that has to do with me and my final edits, but no, the editors are pretty happy with our final product. Good. And I just have to clean it up. But we're thinking June or July.
Okay, so it will be this year.
And it'll be on Amazon and Barnes and Noble and all of that, and we'll have awesome. You and I can talk then, but we'll have a big online launch party or something like that. Yeah.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, it's been wonderful talking to you and getting to know you and the work that you do to help people all around the world. And so if people wanted to get in touch with you, how can they do that? Do you have an email, or is there somewhere that they call in?
Yeah, there's two outlets. Well, there's probably more, but there's a couple of main ways. The clinic does a lot of incoming information if it's more of a patient question, and are you appropriate for what we do and that sort of thing, or they'll forward things. And the clinic is Advanced Medical Therapies, and it's in Seattle, but if you just have advancedmedicaltherapies.com, you will find them. There's only two clinics with that name in the country. One's in Florida, it's a friend of mine's, and one's in Seattle, so pick the Seattle one. Unless you're in Florida, you can pick Mark's. But then, so that's an easy one, advancedmedicaltherapies.com. You can find them on Facebook, same thing, and send messages. The online presence for my writing and stuff like that is just DRA, Dr. A, online. And that's the same on Instagram as it is on Facebook. And there's contact info there. Health professionals, I have something called Consult DRA, consultdra.com. And that is specifically for other healthcare professionals. So I do a lot of teaching about this. And all of them lead back to each other, as you know. So if you get the wrong one, you'll find the right one.
Well, you also do teaching on your podcast, right? You have a podcast, right? Because I did see that.
I do, yes. So it goes live actually later today, Thursdays at 3 Pacific, because I'm out here on the Pacific Coast. And it's on CTR Radio Network. So live, you can listen. They have a listen live tab, but we're also on all of it turns into a podcast. And so we're on iHeartRadio and Apple Tunes or whatever. It's on all of those as well. And it's called Medicine and Health with Dr. Paul Anderson. And I've been doing it close to 6 years. So there's a huge library of, things in there. Yeah. Today we're doing a focus on coronavirus, as you might imagine.
Oh, but, and I was going to ask about that earlier.
Normally I don't, I try and stay away from a lot of hot topics, but this one's there's a lot of really weird information being shared and just for public health purposes.
Well, that's good.
We're gonna spend the whole show about that. So yeah.
Awesome. Well, I hope guys, after this show, Dr. Anderson does have a podcast, so do join him because he is going to be talking about the coronavirus, and I know many of you have reached out to me about that. So let's put the fears aside.
Yeah.
It's interesting what has happened here, and the prices of Purell. And, all that, no milk, no toilet tissue. I'm not sure what toilet tissue has to do with it, but hand sanitizers are gone. I don't know what is happening. So anyway.
It's true. Yeah. If we would have known, you should have bought stock in Scott tissues or something.
I know, and Purell.
Yeah, and there's some of that that's reasonable, but a lot is just panic because people don't know, and especially if they didn't, like if you've lived through a couple of these, you kind of know how it goes. But
Exactly.
this has a lot, like the media is so pervasive. It's like that's escalated people's anxiety, and it's really, you know, you need to be cautious, but it's your anxiety that drives maybe better or worse decisions about things. So
Exactly.
we're going to really break it down to
Good.
what's real, what should we be worried about, how do we protect ourselves, and then what do we do with all this other information? Yeah.
Yeah, that would be wonderful. Well,
Yeah.
thank you so much
All right.
again. I'm so glad that you're here, and thank you guys for watching us. If you did not get a chance to join us in the beginning, please watch the replay, share it with your friends, because we are talking about out-of-the-box cancer therapies, and Dr. Anderson has some wonderful, wonderful information to share. So please do watch again. And thank you again, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Anderson. Namaste, everybody.
Thank you.